I'm Dana. I'm 18 years old. I'm from South Florida, and I'm allergic to peanuts, tree nuts, sesame, fish, and legumes.
Hi, I'm Sofia. I'm 17. I'm from North Carolina, and I'm allergic to dairy, eggs, peanuts, and tree nuts.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm 18. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm allergic to peanuts, tree nuts, soy, melon, pea protein, and bananas.
Awesome. So I wanted to start off right off the bat with, do you guys think food allergies should be able to require meal plans for students with dietary restrictions?
I would say that yes, they should. Of course, it does depend on whether it's public or private. I think that public schools should be required to accommodate all of their students' dietary restrictions, but I don't know what the case would be with private schools specifically.
Yeah, I definitely think that, all schools should be required to accommodate. I think that even if you have food allergies, you still have a right to food, especially from your school. So.
Yeah, I definitely have seen throughout my college search process last year when I was a senior, I've seen so many different ranges of colleges being able to accommodate food allergies. Um, I was interested in a lot of Northeast schools originally, so that's where I primarily researched schools accommodation with food allergies, and I've definitely noticed that people in the Northeast are a lot more accommodating than people here south because I currently go to school in Florida. Um, so that was something I found really interesting. And some schools where you would really expect to have an amazing food allergy policy, at least written on their website, don't. I remember researching NYU, and they just really couldn't guarantee cross contamination or anything like that from what I remember. So that was super surprising because every time I go to New York City, everyone's very accommodating. So it's just such a range, and places that you wouldn't even expect are super accommodating. Even super rural schools like Cornell was so accommodating, and it's just really crazy to see the range all across the country. And I think it's something that definitely should be highlighted at colleges, and people should really talk about it more because so many people have food allergies these days, and it's not just to peanuts. It's so many different things. Even sesame is becoming such a giant allergen, and people should really just start to all colleges should really have a top 8 free section, and students should feel like the chefs are available for them to speak to if they have a question about food allergies. And it really shouldn't be a burden because kids with food allergies like myself, it wasn't our choice. So people should be very accommodating because it is legally, it's a disability, and people should take it very seriously.
Right, I agree. And especially in terms of most of us have multiple allergies. And so I think that having a top 8 or top 9 allergen free station would be so beneficial to most of us to just prevent that cross contamination. And it's just it's a symbol of safety and comfort to know that there's an area of the kitchen that is separate and clean. And I think it'd be great if more schools could start to implement that. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's also a really big difference in the plan they have on paper and what actually plays out in the dining hall. I definitely think I did my college search not in the best way and definitely not taking my allergies into consideration. I only looked at one school because I wanted to play golf at the school. So the college I ended up going to was like, yeah, we can feed you. We got you covered. We have a top 8 station, but a lot of my allergies aren't top 8. So it's one of those things where the plan that they have does in theory work, but it doesn't fully work for every student with dietary restrictions. So I think that's something that colleges should take into consideration, and when those sort of situations happen, that they should definitely work on being there for the students, supporting them, and figuring out what way they can help make it work.
Definitely. And I think understanding that different people have different severities of food allergies, and some people take made in the same facility as or made on shared equipment as very seriously, and just really talking with a student on an individual basis and really taking the time to understand that, I think, is so important. And like, you know, like some schools are like really great in theory. Like Tufts is like great, and I think it was ranked number one a couple of years ago or last year, something like that, by Fair. And I went to a tour and was going to possibly go there, and it looked amazing. And they did have a top 8 free, but I know Cornell had something really similar where they also labeled everything, and they were wonderful there. But you know, in labeling for like everyone else to like get from the buffets, they don't take into consideration like made in the same facility as. So in theory, you know, labeling the foods is a great idea and so great for people with food allergies. But if your allergies are very severe, like it really doesn't apply for you, especially since like pretty much all college campuses are buffet style. Um, so it's just like something in theory that when you think of it like first glance, like it looks great and it seems like it's going to work. But once you really dig into like the details of it just really doesn't work for like it could possibly not work for a certain individual. So it's just really taking the time to understand that, because I feel like food allergies, like people understand like what it means, but they don't really understand what the implications are for each individual, because everyone's so different. And like me being allergic to so many different things is not the same as someone who's just allergic to peanuts. Like I have to, every single food group, every single thing that I could possibly eat, there is a possibility. So I always have to check for absolutely anything. Even something as simple as a salad. When you first think of it, it's just like, yeah, of course, it's fine with my allergies. But no, because I can't eat chickpeas. So there's chickpeas in certain salads. Some people add like walnuts to their salads. Caesar salad dressing has anchovies. So there's always a risk. And people like should like understand that. You know, allergies aren't as straightforward as just being allergic to peanuts. And that's it, you know?
Right, I agree. And also, like, because there's so much variability in each person's experience as an allergic person, I think that's one of the reasons why it's been such a journey to get colleges on board and helping allergic students, because it's just such a process to understand what it entails and how to accommodate for everybody, which ultimately can be tricky because, you know, everybody needs something a bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, so Dana, you were talking about the like may contain labels. What are your guys' opinions on the may contain labels?
You know, for me, I think being allergic to dairy, especially, and dairy is in so many things. For me, I always was more cautious with may contain, especially if it was something that seemed very obviously to have dairy in it. Like, for example, when I would buy soy ice cream and it would say may contain dairy, I would just not buy it because, you know, that's just such a risk because, of course, ice cream probably has dairy. So for me, that was always just something that I would avoid. But I know that there are some people that have taken that risk, but it ultimately could be a 50-50 chance. So it's always put me on edge a little bit.
Yeah, for me, I always, whenever something says like may contain, made in the same facility as, made on shared equipment, I always avoid it. Yeah, that's just the way I've always done it my whole life because my allergies are very severe. And even if something just says like made in the same facility as, like I'm not airborne, but my allergies are just like my peanut allergy is so severe that I can't take that risk. And I just do that for all of my different allergies. So I just really don't want to like incorporate any risk into things that I could eat, especially when it's like my choice and I'm picking something out from the grocery store. So I just always try and avoid it.
I've definitely been the exact opposite growing up. So from the age of like 4 or so, I don't remember the exact age, but that's when my peanut and tree nut allergy, we kind of realized I had that. So from the age of 4 to 16, all I had was peanuts and tree nuts. And that's my most severe one. But the may contain, I don't know, I always took the risk on because I've always fought this battle of wanting to enjoy the same things that everybody else gets to, with like the risk that it may come with. So I've definitely been on the riskier side. You know, should I be? I don't know. I guess it's up to everybody else's discretion, but I've definitely I'm a little more lax on the may contain, or like made in the same facility, unless it's something that like it's like handmade, like bakery stuff. typically. I don't go to a lot of bakeries. It's like things like that. Dessert is not really my thing. But I definitely have been more lax on the make contain. And then starting from age 16 and up is when all the other allergies came along. So it's really hard to know like what those foods like taste like, and they're in a lot of the stuff that you used to really love as a kid growing up, and then now you can't eat them anymore. So it's the war, I think, my internal war of wanting to be able to enjoy the things that I used to be able to, or that I know I would like, or stuff like that. So I just kind of like look past the may contain for most of the time. But
Have you ever reacted from that, or you've been fine with it?
Yeah, I've never had a reaction from a may contain. I also just think that in facilities, obviously I don't know exactly how they work, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of the times things are made very area specific just because they're made in such large quantities. So that's just a risk that I've been willing to take, but I've never had any consequences from that. So,
What about you, Sophia? Have you ever experienced?
I did. I had an interesting allergic reaction when I was in 4th grade from a cookie I ate that had the what's it called? The chocolate chip cookies were not the chocolate chip cookies, but the chocolate chips themselves were made with a bit of dairy in them, because it was like they were using the same type of chocolate that they were making for other things. And it was kind of a may contain, but they didn't necessarily put that on the ingredient label for the cookie itself. So I ate it, but it wasn't a high enough dose to put me into anaphylaxis. But the entire day, I was just in this weird middle state between like feeling really, really terrible, but not enough for it to present itself as a typical allergic reaction. So it was a really strange thing. But I think that's one of the reasons that I've always just been more careful, because it's just a really weird situation where you don't know exactly what's happening to you.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you ever experienced like anaphylaxis?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, when I was younger, I definitely did. And luckily I come from a pretty cautious family, so I haven't had one in a long time. I think I was maybe 7. Um, but that's just because I've been so avoidant. And then I've had some of those weird like in between reactions where the dose was low enough to where I wasn't in anaphylaxis. So I have those two experiences, those two types.
Wow. Did your throat like close up when you were 7 and that happened?
Yeah, I did. It was very much like the typical anaphylaxis, like I was vomiting, I had hives. That actually happened while I was doing a like a food oral challenge at a hospital. So I just remember, of course everyone was there to help, but it was definitely a full-on reaction. Um, so yeah, there's definitely levels of intensity that can occur. Um, but that's one of the reasons why it may contain statements can always just be so like you never really know how bad a reaction is going to be. But Hannah, I'm so curious about like your situation with the may contain, because I know you mentioned in a previous conversation with sesame, and that being in a lot of potentially in a lot of foods, because they're not cleaning their facility before they start making things like meats or breads. So what are your opinions on that, and how have you been handling that?
yeah, so my sesame allergy, I actually have an allergy test coming up. I think that's one of my ones that kind of recently has started. So I haven't had it like on my allergy test, but I have had like I just get mainly itchy throat, like a lip swelling with it, which is like my most common like mild reaction symptoms. But buying bread has been a struggle. I'm sure, Dana, you've realized that you have a sesame allergy. But where they now have to label for sesame, a lot of companies are just kind of sprinkling in like less than 2%. So they don't have to go through the whole process of it. And I think that's been not okay and very frustrating, I'm sure, for especially people with anaphylactic reactions to sesame. I can only imagine how stressful that is. I tried to go buy hot dog buns the other day, and there was not a single one on the shelf that didn't have contain sesame in it. And it was just like straight up contain sesame, not even may contain, because we all know I'll scoop by that one, but it has like the contains in it, which I think has been very interesting and should not be allowed at all.
Yeah, I will say for bread, it's so frustrating as someone with sesame. It's definitely been many years in the making since I've had this like allergy since I was born, but I found out when I was 1. So I've had a lot of time to like figure out what breads work and what don't. I will say the Nature's Own is always like a good brand, and I think they do sell hot dog buns. So if you want to look into that, I would definitely recommend. But yeah, it's just like every bread has the possibility of having sesame in it. It's not just now because of the legislation. It's been always, at least for me, because whenever I go to a restaurant, I can never eat the bread. Not only is it like may contain sesame, it's also cross contaminated with like nuts or weirdly, you wouldn't think that for bread, but it happens. So having a sesame allergy, as I'm sure you're now discovering, Hannah, is like very frustrating because it's in everything and it's everything that you would never expect. Like the sauces, the salad dressings, the seasonings, like literally you name it, sesame can be in it. Even if it's a pastry. Like how weird is that? It's crazy. Sesame allergies are not fun. So sorry that happened, Hannah, but at least it's very mild, so that's good.
It's so unfortunate too because I found out through Everything Bagel seasoning, which I absolutely loved the taste of, but obviously I can't enjoy it anywhere, which I'm sure you don't know what it tastes like, but it's the best thing ever. It's so unfortunate, but I had no clue that it like had the possibility of it being in bread before then, so I can only imagine the struggle of that. But I knew the peanuts one because sometimes you go to like restaurants that are a little fancier and they'll like have nuts just with the bread. And it's like not necessary, but okay. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and nuts is in everything too. I know like I can't eat French fries at fast food places because they're made in peanut oil and all that, and that's so
Oh,
frustrating.
Chick-fil-A is the worst. I'm
Yeah,
sure you've never had it, right?
no, I haven't.
Yeah, me either. You can't like if you're allergic to like peanuts, you can't eat anything at Chick-fil-A.
It's awful. Yeah. So like so on that topic, do you guys think that there should be some sort of regulation where companies should have to clean their conveyor belts or whatever they're using before they continue to make their products? Or do you think it's okay for them to just run with being like, okay, well, we have this allergen and we're not going to clean our stuff? Um, because it is more work for them, but also I do think that there should be something done about just implementing these cleaning practices so that more people can have their products.
yeah, so I definitely think that a lot of companies don't take into consideration the actual amount of people with food allergies. I think that's honestly just like a whole global experience, like societal experiences that a lot of people don't understand that, the vast majority of people that have food allergies and how that affects a lot of their consumers. So I definitely think that's something that's important that should be implemented. I feel like it's something that they should want to just do on their own. But obviously, not everybody has that mindset until they have to live the life or they have somebody that they love that has to live the food allergy life. So it's
Yeah.
unfortunate the way it is.
I think that it's such an important concept, especially in theory, because we should all like all the companies should like clean their equipment after they're using something with like, top 9 allergen. But it's also like I I don't understand like completely like why they wouldn't do that, but I do understand like from a legal standpoint, there's a lot of liability in terms of like someone being anaphylactic and like it still being in the same factory, and someone reacting and then possibly suing the company. So that's when it gets a little bit of gray area. But I think in theory, like that would be so amazing if all the companies could do that. But in practice, it's pretty hard. But there should definitely be more options where companies do that, so that people with allergies can have a wider range of foods that they can eat.
Right, I agree. And also that whole issue of liability is a huge reason why I think so many companies and restaurants and colleges are behind, is just like that risk of saying it's safe, but maybe it's not safe. And of course, that is on you for, making sure that it is okay for your consumers. And so a lot of times people just don't care or they move on because it's not even worth catering to that group of the population, which is really unfortunate. But I do think that there is so much revenue that could come from catering to people like us, because it would be so amazing to have more options and to have like the companies that are doing well are really like a staple in like the allergy community, like Made Good or Abe's. Like everybody knows those companies because they are like top 9 allergen free or whatever free, or they're vegan and they're nut free, and like that is super helpful. So the more companies that we could have like that, I think the better we would all be as an allergy community.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like even just, from people who don't have food allergies, like, those products are still great. Like I remember being at Costco and they were giving out samples of the Made Good and like everyone was trying them. And then I just saw people walking and they're like, those are the best. And, they might have not have had food allergies and just thought they were great. So, it's not just for people with food allergies, but, those companies should really try and like expand their options just to include people with food allergies, and they could still make great products regardless. Just include a few more people, make extra revenue. Should be a win-win in theory, so I don't see why not.
I do that a lot of the food allergy friendly companies are like smaller, more individually owned type businesses, which is something that never really can, I guess, survive in our food system the way that it is. Because if you think about it, every single popular brand is owned by like the same really, really big company that produces stuff. And so they kind of like knock all those smaller brands off the shelf. I know it's so hard to go and like, I find this, dairy free, peanut free, everything free ice cream, and I absolutely love it. And I go to the grocery store next week and it's gone and it's just not there anymore. And I have like yet to see it again. So it's one of those things where it makes it very difficult as somebody with food allergies to find food that we can have and that we enjoy and that it stays, because those businesses can only do so much to keep themselves on the shelf when you have such large companies, I guess, that are taking over our grocery stores and our food system. So.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah, those mom and pop shops that, are doing so much for typically their kids with allergies are so quickly gone. And it's like a constant readjusting when like I find a brand that I like and I trust and then it's not there, which has happened to me so many times. And then you have to kind of start over and find a new dessert or a new snack that actually works for you and that can actually make its way up. And obviously there are bigger like allergy brand names now that are staying, but it's very rare and far and few between. And so I just feel like the more companies that could really, stick around, or if there was more funding, and I just feel like there could be such an opportunity there for like some stable allergy friendly brands.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like with the rise of like, the whole idea of inclusivity, whether people, have a disability or what have you, different size ranges, I feel like there's this giant movement to being more inclusive. I think we should also include the people with invisible disabilities, like those with food allergies, as well. And I've definitely seen a shift in the past like 5 or so years, from having food allergies from when I was so young. There was definitely not as many resources or brands. But now there's a lot more. I still think that there's still giant room for improvement though. So definitely looking forward to hopefully seeing the more of the shift towards being inclusive of people with food allergies as well.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, speaking about inclusivity, I was curious of you guys' opinions on restaurants, and that there is kind of a shift now into they're trying to be more inclusive, but obviously there's a long way to go for so many restaurants and brands. So what are you guys' thoughts on the inclusivity of restaurants, or do you feel like there needs to be more that's done? Um, yeah.
I feel like there's so much more that could be done. I've definitely come across quite a few like restaurants that are like, yeah, we take food allergies very seriously. So feel free to like order what you want and we'll make it work. But I feel like that's a big minority of them. There's not every restaurant I go to does that. And I usually try to cater the restaurants I go to towards my food allergies. So I know that like, for example, Italian typically works pretty well for me. But even then, I've still had a lot of like problems in the past, and I have to like repeatedly talk to the server and be like, "Oh, hey, was this chicken prepared with the fish?" and, a couple times they've said yes, and I've had to send it back. So I feel like there's still quite a lot that needs to be done. And I feel like it should be standard practice for restaurants to educate their employees in food allergy safety and avoiding cross contamination. So yeah, just feel like there's so many different things that restaurants need to do going forward, because I've definitely seen places that have been really great with my food allergies, like, certain restaurants. I'm from the Fort Lauderdale area, so, it's not very rural. So people are more so aware of food allergies there. So I've had some really great experiences there. And also just seeing the level of food allergy education. I just want to shout out Cornell right now, because every single like chef I talked to there was like food allergy educated. And I think that everywhere we go, not even just college campuses, restaurants included, should have that training required for whoever works there. So I definitely think that's really important. And there's giant room for improvement for restaurants to incorporate food allergy education.
Yeah, I know earlier you were talking about inclusivity, and I've definitely seen a shift in a lot of gluten-free stuff in restaurants. I feel like that's more on the menu, vegan stuff, which is, dairy-free for the most part. I guess that's really what that is. I don't know if there's ever any like cross-contamination problems there, but I definitely think possibly, hopefully, in theory, sometime in the future would be amazing, is like a top 9 allergy being implemented at a lot of restaurants, especially chain restaurants that you kind of see everywhere. I feel like that would give like places that, like safety places, like, you can go there and there's stuff on the menu, it's going to be there. I think that would be so cool to be able to have that opportunity, because I know I get super awkward when you have to like, yeah, I have allergies to this, and this, and this. Like, what can I have on the menu? Okay. And I'll wait for you to bring the allergy menu out with all the ingredients, and like having to go through that whole process. It's like a 30-minute process just to even see the menu and the ingredients in it. It's a super, and I wouldn't say embarrassing, but just very awkward encounter, I feel like. When it shouldn't be, but it feels like it is. And I feel like especially when I go out with other people, it always feels like it's like I'm like holding up the process or making it take longer. So I definitely think that having like a starting point, I guess, on the menu would be super, super nice to have.
Right. I completely agree. I think especially for chain restaurants that definitely have the money and are definitely like here to stay, they should try to implement that, because it would be so helpful to be able to travel to any state, and just know that there's always like a Chick-fil-A or a McDonald's that can cater, and that is just there if you need it. And it's also just, yeah, I mean, it is kind of frustrating to be viewed as this inconvenience and be like, oh, well, I need to have it this free and that free and this free. And it can be frustrating to have to educate the waiter and the server while you're there. And so to have a bit more of that awareness, and to maybe have some sort of, offshoot of like a top 9 allergen thing would be so helpful for so many people, I think.
Definitely so much room for improvement, and especially at like chain restaurants, like you said, Sophia, like it should definitely be standard practice. Like I've seen an increase in food allergy menus, but I think it should be more standard practice for just every single chain restaurant. I've really only seen that with Panera. I know they have an allergy menu and all of that. But I remember a couple of years back, they did have some problems with like a nut allergy or something like that. I remember reading. So always room for improvement. They've done better, with the food allergy menu and all that, but it should be so much more widespread. I would love to see that at every single chain restaurant, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I know earlier we were talking about liability, so I was wondering what your guys' opinions are. I guess, Sophia, you're looking at colleges right now, and Dana, you and I are both in college, and what your opinions are on colleges requiring a meal plan, because I know that's like a super popular thing, widespread. You see it at a lot of colleges. Kind of what your experiences are, Sophia, looking at it, Dana, maybe experiencing it.
Yeah, I definitely think it should absolutely not be required. I definitely understand why it would be, food insecurity and all of that, trying to make sure that all the freshmen are eating and have regular access to food. And I think that's super important. But to be honest, like as someone with food allergies, and who like tends to have food allergy related anxiety when I'm eating out, just to like have to eat from a meal plan every single meal and to not have access to like a kitchen usually in a dorm. I think that's really not great. I know I was supposed to go to Cornell, but I ended up coming to UF primarily because of my food allergies and just really wanting access to my own kitchen and eating on my own terms. And while they were so great with food allergy like policies, it's just like a peace of mind thing for me having, have had like my parents make my own food, like me bringing my own food to like school and things. So I definitely think that, there should definitely be an exemption policy. And, with that policy, students with food allergies should have access to like dorms with like, common areas and like a kitchen in them rather than, the classic like kitchen on the floor thing for the different dorms. So I definitely think that should be standard practice because, while in theory it's great to have like great food allergy education in like dining halls, there's some people with, very severe allergies like myself who would much rather just make their own food and like can take that on. Because while it seems like a very like difficult task, being a college freshman, it's definitely something that I feel like should be an option at least for people with severe food allergies.
Yeah, I think for me as well, like the concept of that specialized meal plan or having a special meal for me would be really great. I think the way that it's set up right now, where it's like you're forced to eat the meal plans that they give you is really challenging. Of course, I'm not in college, but having spoken to so many colleges and that same thing of like, okay, well, we have this meal plan that you have to pay for, but that really I can't eat at. And that can be very frustrating. And I've heard a lot of experiences of allergic friends of mine who have had to pay for a meal plan and they also have to get like the actual food that they can eat on the side, which sucks because it would be great if they could just be exempt from that if that's their experience. And so I just don't think that colleges are really taking into consideration that flexibility that people need with their diet, which is unfortunate. And I think it would be great if we could kind of modernize that system.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually go to a college where meal plans are required, which is, pretty typical, I feel like. And I get the logistics behind it, the food insecurity. I understand that, they have to pay for it somehow. So having that, set money that they know that they have, I mean, it makes sense. But not having the option to not be on a meal plan where I could not eat is very hard as a student. I know my first year, some of my meals would just consist of pineapple and a Pepsi. And obviously, like you can't survive off of pineapple and a Pepsi for a meal. And to get off of like a meal plan or just to work out like some sort of situation can be very difficult for a student, and it takes a lot of time. It's emotionally taxing. I feel like constantly having to self-advocate in a place that you would expect that you shouldn't have to. That that the people that you're talking with, they're there to support you and they understand, and trying to like get people to understand. It's just not easy for a student. And so I just think that there's a lot of negatives that come with having required meal plans for students with dietary restrictions. So, I mean, understand having, required meal plans for students with non-allergy restrictions. But for students that do have that, I definitely think that an option or other options should be automatically offered. I don't think that it should be required for people with restrictions because it just causes way too much grief and turmoil, and it's just not easy for the student after that.
Yeah, I totally understand, Hannah, because while I'm not currently on a meal plan since I live off campus and, I'm lucky enough to go to a school that doesn't require you to be on a meal plan, I'm also, in a sorority that requires, you to pay for meals. And I just recently joined and it's been very frustrating because while I initially joined and I talked to the chef and made sure that I would be accommodated, um, I expected from speaking to them that they would, make my meal ahead of time, separately to avoid my allergens, which was the impression I was under that they would do that. And then I went in for a meal like yesterday and I had to go in and ask like, oh, hey, like, is my food ready? like, I'm sorry, I know it's dinner and you're busy. And they're like, yeah, let me just get something from the back. And while I feel really grateful that they were able to do that, it's just, a very big peace of mind thing to know that my food was made ahead of time, separately, put in a box. Like I've experienced, going to these different colleges and asking about their meal plans, consistently every single one of them did that. So I just thought it would translate to being in a sorority, especially since I already spoke to the chef and it's still a large amount of people, but it's not thousands like in a dining hall. So I assumed it would translate, especially since it's a smaller scale. So I'm still trying to figure that out. They've been pretty nice for the most part, but it's just a matter of like, going through the logistics and having to meet with them, but they're busy and they don't want to meet with you. Or they can't. So it's just a very big logistical thing from someone with food allergies who has to be on a meal plan. And I definitely think there should be options, especially, when a school requires it. At least I have the luxury of being able to, cook my own food at my apartment when I don't feel comfortable eating at like a sorority house or something. So I definitely think it should not be required at colleges and they should really provide other options, like you said, Hannah. All right. Thank you guys so much for being on this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.